Hi everyone, this is Sag Star, Master of Scary Stories, and I'm here today to share with you the mysterious and crazy story of the Black-Eyed Children. I'm super excited about what we're going to be talking about today. What we're going to be talking about is the Black-Eyed Children. I don't know if you guys know about them. They're a fairly new supernatural phenomenon. And they're a little freaky. I'm not going to lie. One thing when I was deciding to do this video, I at first was a little scared and hesitant. I don't know why. It's really weird, and it's important for me to tell you guys that I was hesitant about this, and I was a little bit freaked out, and I kind of didn't want to do it. It was kind of like my gut was telling me, don't do this, don't look into this, and I don't know why. Like, I don't know why my instincts were telling me that. But it's really important for me to let you know that, because this is actually going to be a two-part video. And so right now in this video, I'm going to be telling you guys the stories about the Black-Eyed Children, but in the next video, I'm going to be telling you about theories, ways that they affect you. And one of the ways that they do affect you is that you do get this weird guttural instinct to stay away from them. Okay, so the first story that I want to share with you guys is known to be the origin story of the Black-Eyed Children, and then we can also call them Becks for short, because that's what people usually call them. It was told by Brian Bethel in 1996. So that's why I say it's fairly new, because we only really have record going back to 1996 of these stories of these Black-Eyed Children. Brian Bethel is a journalist from Abilene, Texas. Basically, his story goes is that one night he decided he was going to go to like the multiplex mall to pay a bill in one of the stores there. So, you know, he drives down to the mall, he parks, and he's parked in front of this movie theater. So he's still in the car writing a check. I don't know if you guys know what a check is. I know everything's done like online through like Apple Pay and everything nowadays, but yes, we used to write checks. So he was in his car writing out the check before he got out, and it was pretty late at night. As he was doing that, he hears a knock on the window. So he gets up to look, and when he gets up to look, he notices that there are two young men staring at him with hoodies on, you know, very like dark in demeanor, like you couldn't really see their faces, kind of like shadowed from the night, and they just look pretty creepy. But he's like, okay, this is kind of weird. So he, you know, rolls down his window just like a little crack, and he's like, what do you guys want? And one of the kids is telling him that he and his friend are going to watch the last showing, and they wanted to know if they could get a ride from him because they forgot their money at their house. So they needed a ride to go back to their house to get the money so they could see the last showing. Well, Brian, from the very beginning, like I said, thought this is a little bit weird and a little bit funny, and kind of like how I was saying before about those instincts that he had, like inside saying, I don't know, something is just odd and wrong about this. So Brian decides, I'm going to test to see if they're actually telling me the truth. So luckily he was right in front of the movie theater, and he can see the marquee. So he's like looking up at the marquee, and he asks the children, what movie are you guys going to see? And the kid, of course, right away says Pokemon, and he can see that Pokemon is playing up there. So he's like, oh, okay. He's like, okay, well, maybe they're telling the truth. But then he notices something else. Okay, he notices the times of the showings. And what he notices is that the last showing is already showing. So the last time they missed it by like 15 minutes. So how is it possible for them to be going to the house to get their money to come back to watch the last showing when the last showing has already been on for like 15 minutes? So he's like, no. Something is wrong here. So he's like, no, I'm going to tell them no. And then as he turns to look back at them, he notices like his hand is already reaching for the door. And it just startles him because he actually had no intention at all of letting them in. And as he looks at his hand and pulls it away, he looks at them and he sees for the very first time their eyes. Okay, and this is the spooky thing about these black-eyed children. Their eyes aren't just black, okay? It's not like they have very dark brown eyes or just black colored eyes. No, their whole eye socket is black. The whole white area around is black. They have no color around the pupils. Everything is just black, dark, soulless eyes. And it creeps him out so much. But he tells the kids, no, you guys already missed the last showing by 15 minutes, so I'm not going to be taking you. And the kids don't want to take no for an answer. They're like, oh, come on, we're just kids. What can we do? They're trying to act innocent and convince him to let them in the car. And he just gets freaked out so much. He's just like, no. And he just, jets, drives away. So as he's driving away, he just like looks up in his rearview mirror and to see the kids, like where they're going. And he notices that they're gone. They vanished. They're completely out of sight. And he said that from where he was, that he would have been able to see them. Like he had just driven away. And that he should have been able to see them walking away to see where they were going. But they were nowhere to be found. So after that whole first incident with them, a while later, Brian Bethel claims that he was actually going to a psychic. And when he went to the psychic had told him that the night before he came to see her, that he had a dream, or she actually had a dream about him. And in her dream, he let the black-eyed children in his car. And when he did that, he ended up dying. So, I mean, obviously, he listened to his instincts in the end. And it was the right thing to do because who knows what could have happened if he let them in. Okay, so the next story I want to tell you about is brought to us by David Weatherly. If you guys don't know who he is yet, he is an author. He actually wrote a book about the black-eyed children called The Black-Eyed Children. And he is probably considered to be one of, if not the expert on these Becks. He actually told this story in his book, and it goes one night that there was a couple who was driving to go have dinner. They lived in New York. It was evening time. They were hungry. They parked their car, and as soon as they parked their car on the passenger side, these black-eyed children showed up. They were asking them, hey, can we get a ride to one of our friends' house? And of course the man, said he was just hungry, he had a long day. They just got there. He was not going to go out of his way to take some kids to their friend's house. So he just right away was like, no, I'm not doing it. Of course, they didn't want to take no for an answer again. And they were begging him, please take us. We're just kids. It'll only take a minute, please. And the guy was just like really irritated at this point. So he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. So he looks at his wife, and his wife is just sitting there like crazy, like stunned, shocked, not moving, and really afraid. And he's like, what the heck's going on with her? So he looks up, and he actually sees the children really good for the first time, because he's on the driver's side and they appeared in the passenger side, so he wasn't really paying attention to them at first. And then he really gets a good look at them and can see their eyes and notices, you guessed it, the dark, black, soulless eyes of the black-eyed children. They got freaked out, needless to say. So they both jump out of the car and run to the restaurant where there's a doorman there. They tell the doorman, oh my God, did you see those kids? Like, did you see them? And they start to explain to him, and he's looking, he's like, no, I didn't see anything. And they look back, and they're completely gone. So they don't know where these kids went. They just completely vanished. Nobody else saw them. But they saw them, and they obviously were very freaked out by them. So they continue with their life, you know, with their dinner, their life. They go on not thinking about it again. And some years later, this couple decides that they want to go ahead and purchase a new home. So what they do is they decide to go house hunting. So the way it goes, if you are looking for a home, is, you know, you call the realtor, you set up appointments, and, you know, you choose to see like several houses. Usually you do it in one day because you don't want to spread it out, because you have to see many. So people usually take like a weekend or whatever to see these houses and, you know, see if they like them or whatever. And so that's what that couple was doing that day. They were out. They decided to look in New Jersey. So they were out in New Jersey, and they were just, you know, going from house to house with their appointments with the realtors. And they got done with this one house, and they get in the car, and the husband, you know, looks over to the wife, and he's like, okay, so give me the next address so I can put it into the GPS. And so the wife proceeds to read off the address, and he just looks shocked, and like blood drains from his face, and he is just like not moving and stunned. And the wife is like, what's wrong? What's going on? And he's like, where did you get that address? And the wife's like, it's the address of, you know, the next house we're gonna see. Like, it just, not a big deal. And he still is like demanding, like, where did you get that address? And she's like, I don't know, it's just one of the houses we're looking at. He finally tells her that he has been hiding something from her for a while. So as it turns out, after that first encounter with the Becks at the restaurant, sometime later, those same children found him at his work. So they actually followed him to his office, showed up in his office, and again was asking him if they could give him, or if he could give them a ride to their friend's house. And of course he's like, no, what are you guys talking about? Like, I'm not gonna just, I mean, that's pretty odd. First he sees them, you know, on the side of the road. Yes, okay, that happens often. But now they're showing up at his work, and he's like, no, I'm not giving you a ride. But the difference in this encounter is that the kids actually give him an address where they want to go. And so, you guessed it, the address that they gave him is the same address that the wife had told him was their next appointment to see their future, one of their future houses maybe. So needless to say, I don't think they visited that house. They just pretty much took off, and it was probably one of the scariest experiences of their life. Okay, so this last story that I want to tell you is probably one of the freakiest ones that I heard while researching this. And the reason why I say that is because the lady who was telling it told it in such great detail, and it was just, she had like thrown in things that you wouldn't necessarily need to be explaining about when you're storytelling. It was like things that didn't really even matter like to the storyline. So I don't know. I just, as a researcher, you want to question every story that you are investigating, and you know, you can tell when some of them are like, oh, okay, they're not that plausible, it might not have happened. But this one, it, to me, just struck me as like, this could really be true. Like, this lady seems like the real deal. And I will definitely link the article below, and because I want people to read it for themselves, because it's, when you read it, like I said, you just really tend to believe it. This article is brought to us by a website called Week in Weird, and it's run by two paranormal investigators, and they actually, it's a really cool website. You guys should check it out too while you're there looking at the article. And this lady just happens to email them this story. What she says is a warning to people about these black-eyed children. So she just felt the need to share this story. She said it had happened to her a year before. What happened is, it was at night. She was sleeping with her husband in bed. She said it was around 2 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden she hears a really loud banging at the door. So she gets up right away thinking, oh, maybe it's somebody that got in an accident or got stranded on the side of the road, their car's broken down or something. She says that this kind of thing normally happens a lot where she lives, because she lives, first of all, in Vermont, and it was the middle of winter and it's super snowy, and people just tend to get in a lot of accidents. And it's happened, you know, once or twice before to her. So she just automatically sprung up out of bed thinking, oh, it must be that. So maybe somebody needs help. So she runs over to the window, looks out the window, and she says all she could see is like little footsteps in the snow. But no sign of like a car or a car accident or anything. And from where her window is positioned, she could just like see the backs of the people who were at her door. So she couldn't really see them, but she can only like kind of just barely see the backs of them. And for some weird reason, when she looked out the window, she just got this real gut feeling that something was wrong. And here we go, our, you know, theme, reoccurring theme of these Becks is that you just get this really weird feeling and something telling you, do not trust them, something is weird here. So she felt so weird that she decided, I'm gonna go wake up my husband. I don't feel comfortable opening the door. So she goes and does that, wakes up her husband. Meanwhile, they're still banging on the door. So her husband comes out, opens the door, and from where she's standing, she says she can't see them, but she can just hear the conversation. And they ask, can we come in to wait for our parents? Our parents are on the way. And the husband kind of just like looks at her, and she's, you know, they like don't know what to do. And she still had this feeling like something's wrong. And it kind of seemed like he had this feeling too. But for some reason, he just let them in. Okay. And that's kind of another thing, like with Brian and with this husband, like it's kind of like even before they can think about it or fight it, they just do it. Like, you know, Brian was already reaching for the car door, and the husband's just like, okay, just come in. And they don't, you know, even though they kind of don't want to, they just do it. And you know, we'll get into it in the next video, but they do think that they have some kind of like mind control over you. So they let them in. The husband, and now she gets a good look at him, their 2 children, go to sit down in the living room, and she goes into the kitchen to make hot cocoa. One thing she does notice about them is that they just seem odd. Like odd, out of place. She says that they're dressed really weird, not for cold weather. And it's like super snowy outside, so that's odd. She said the girl just had this long black hair, and then the boy had this really like old-fashioned haircut, like a bowl cut. So she said they looked odd, different, and that's another recurring theme of them, is that they just look out of place and not right. So like I said, we'll get more into that in the next video. So she's in the kitchen making hot cocoa, and they have like several cats, and she said usually their cats are like really friendly and, you know, curious. They want to see who's out there, but this time they were nowhere to be found except for one cat whose name was Pigeon. Pigeon decided to hang around her in the kitchen while she was making the hot cocoa, but he seemed very frightened, like his back was hunched up, you know, just like when a cat is like on guard. So she noticed that, and she's like, wanted to comfort him, so she goes down to pet him, and he just hisses at her and runs and hides under one of the cabinets. So then the lady goes back into the living room. She, you know, is serving the cocoa, and she notices her husband is acting strange. He has his hands like that on his head and looks like something's wrong, and she's like, what's going on? He says, no, I just feel dizzy. And right at that moment, she turns to look at the kids and finally got to look at them in the eyes for the first time. She then realized what obviously her husband had just realized, that they had, again, those black, soulless, you know, eyes. No whites around the eyes, no colors, just completely black and looking freaky. And so she's just like stunned. Right at that moment, they get up and say, can we use the restroom? And she's like, yeah, it's over there. So they go to use the restroom. She turns back to her husband and notices that his nose is bleeding. So she's like, oh my God, your nose is bleeding. Let me get you some tissue. She gets up to go get the tissue, and right at that moment, all of the lights in the house turn off. All of the electricity was down. She obviously was freaked out, and she was in her hallway. She turns and she looks, and she sees these 2 children just standing there staring at her. And she is like, at this moment, she says she was freaked out. Like, that was it. That was the moment for her. So right away, the children say, our parents are here, and they just take off out the door. So as they're walking down the driveway, the husband and wife jump up, close the door. They look out the window, and what do they see? They see those same children getting into a black car, and they see their parents. And the reason why I put quotes on that is because their parents are 2 men dressed in all black suits. Okay, does that sound a little bit familiar? Men in Black, maybe? Another theory we're going to get into in the next video. There's so many. Like, you guys, there's so many theories about who these kids are, where they come from, what they want, all of this stuff. So that's why I had to break it up into 2, because this is just too much to do in one. So they are gone. So they said they're gone. Half an hour later, all the lights turn back on. Then she proceeds to tell about, you know, afterwards. after what happens when she let them in. And she says that a lot of strange things happened, that in the next 3 months, their cats, most of them went missing. And the craziest one is that they actually came home one day and found that little kitty, the one who, you know, was sticking around her, the only one that was watching the black-eyed children, Pigeon. They found Pigeon in a pool of her own blood. So the vet had said that Pigeon had had some kind of hemorrhage, which is all that they could figure. Maybe that happened with Pigeon. Not only that, her husband was continuing to have nosebleeds, and they didn't know what was going on. So they eventually went to the doctors to inquire about it, and they found out that her husband had gotten skin cancer. And not just any skin cancer, it was a certain kind of skin cancer that was a little bit rare and not a lot of people got. It was the kind of skin cancer that you get from tanning too much in tanning beds. So overuse of tanning beds. Her husband, needless to say, was not a tanner. He did not use tanning beds. He did not go outside for long periods of time to be exposed to sun. So they could not really figure out how he had gotten this specific kind of skin cancer. She also said that she was not feeling good. She was getting nosebleeds. She was getting dizzy. And she said there were other things that were wrong with her that she didn't want to share just because they were too private. But that's like another one of the things, like, okay, why wouldn't you just say what it is if it wasn't a true story? So, I mean, there's just a lot of things in her story that kind of lead me to believe, like, this is a legit sighting of black-eyed children, and what can happen when you actually let them in. Okay, so those are my 3 stories for today. I hope you guys enjoyed them. Please make sure to give this video a like and a share, and subscribe to my channel, and make sure that you hit that notification bell. That way when I do post a new video, you will be the first to know. And if you have any suggestions on what you would like to hear about, I'd be happy to look into anything. So just go ahead and leave a comment. I do read all my comments. And I want to just say thank you again for watching, and have a nice day. Thank you.